Welcome back to Logic Basics. This is part 2 of our discussion of what is public discourse. Remember, we're going over that handout and we're trying to find ways to clean up the discourse out there. Today we're going to talk about common ground. So let's look at the handout again. And we're on this point for common ground for public discourse. So let's just start. We'll just go over this. In order to engage in meaningful public discourse, especially with regards to difficult topics such as religion and politics, there must be some common ground or some ground rules. The following are necessary for securing common ground for public discourse. Now, is this necessary to have common ground for public discourse? If we want to make progress and not just be stuck in emotionalism or the will to power like we talked about last video. All right, now let's look at each of these pieces of common ground. I think you'll see it makes a lot of sense. The first one is, as people in a common discourse, a public common discourse, then we should be committed to reason. Why? We're rational beings, and reason, the laws of thought, is the means for attaining meaning in our discourse. And so we should be committed to the laws of thought, and the laws of thought as the laws of being. Reason applies to being. Let's see if we can secure common ground point 1 with our conversation partners out there. Would you be willing to go on Facebook and say, "Dear Facebook friends, are you committed to reason, the laws of thought as applied to being and thinking?" Let's see what we can do there. Let's just get that one piece in place. I think we'd make a lot of progress. Second, we should have integrity or consistency between what we say and what we do. If you say you're committed to the laws of thought, then you should use the laws of thought and follow through. Follow where reason leads you. Let's say you claim to be committed to some position, perhaps skepticism. Nobody can really know. If you really think that position is accurate, then you should live consistently with that position. If nobody can really know, why are we trying to persuade one another in the public sphere? Have integrity. Integrity is wholeness. That word means wholeness. It is consistency between what we say and what we do. So if we say something, we should do it. So if we say we're skeptics, we should live that way. And we'll talk more about skepticism soon. All right, the third point of common ground. We should affirm that some things are clear to reason. And because they are clear to reason, they're easily knowable. And because they're easily knowable, we can and should know what is clear to reason. If we're seeking to know, and we're seeking to know because we have integrity, right? We say we're rational beings. We're going to follow where reason leads. And guess what? Reason leads us to see that some things are clear. The very first thing it leads us to see is that it's clear that you can't have both A and non-A in the same respect and at the same time. That's pretty clear. We will go over some more details on some things are clear. Maybe I'll even draw a diagram of that soon. All right, so can we affirm that some things are clear to reason, particularly the laws of thought? And maybe we can agree that it's clear to reason that being cannot come from non-being. Being is something that exists. It has properties, attributes, power to be. Non-being is something that doesn't exist. It has no properties, no attributes, no power to be. You can't get being from non-being, right? That's clear to reason. All right, the next point. Point 4 of common ground. We need to address the more basic issues prior to addressing the less basic issues. So this has to do with presuppositional thinking. Remember, we went over this when I drew the house. At the bottom, I had the more basic, and then going up is less basic. So in a conversation with others, we need to address the fundamentals first. the more basic questions prior to less basic questions. In our diagram of the house, that means we have to address epistemological differences first, and then we could discuss metaphysical differences. That might be the level where religion comes in, metaphysics. And then we can discuss ethical differences, political differences. But if we don't agree on the more basic things, if we don't agree on epistemology, we're not going to agree on metaphysics. And if we don't agree on metaphysics, we're definitely not going to agree on ethics. And politics is part of ethics. But on the other hand, if we can agree on the more basic, we can and will agree on the less basic. Let's say we can settle disputes in the area of epistemology. How do I know things? Let's say we definitely can answer that question. How do I know? And then we can move on. Now we have a method to talk about differences in metaphysics. And maybe if we can settle metaphysical questions, we could move on to settling disputes within ethics. If we do not agree on the more basic, we cannot and will not agree on the less basic, and we shouldn't move on in the conversation. If we haven't secured agreement on the ground level, let's not move up to the second story of the house. That will just cause more discourse pollution. It will cause more disagreement, more vocal disagreement, because we haven't addressed the more basic issues. So here's the last point. Conversation without common ground will not be productive conversation. And this is where you give yourself permission to walk away from a conversation if you cannot secure common ground. I've had to do this. I've had to walk away from a conversation where we couldn't even get agreement on the laws of thought. So if we can't agree on the laws of thought, there's not going to be any further discussion we can have that's profitable. And I think this is true in any conversation, public or private. So commit this to memory, the points of common ground, commitment to the laws of thought, integrity, affirmation that some things are clear to reason, and the necessity of addressing more basic things or presuppositional thinking. Okay, let's put that in our memory, and then we'll put it into practice, right? So if we have it in our minds, we can put it into practice, and we can work together to make the world a better place by having better conversations, better ideas, better communication. Better ideas will drive better actions, okay? Next time, we're going to talk about addressing human beings in the public sphere. We'll talk about different levels of human personality. We're not just logic machines. We actually have a pretty complex nature. And so how do you address people who are very complex and have a lot of different modes of being? So let's talk about that next, human nature.